afternoon. I'd like to welcome back our speaker today, Treasurer John Kennedy. John was elected without opposition to his fourth term as state treasurer in 2011. As treasurer, he oversees the state's $10.6 billion investment portfolio. He also oversees local and state bond issues and returns millions of dollars in unclaimed property each year. Prior to his position as treasurer, Mr. Kennedy served as secretary of the Department of Revenue Special Counsel to Governor Romer and secretary of Governor Romer's cabinet. He was also an attorney and partner with Baton Rouge and New Orleans law firm of Chack McCall. Mr. Kennedy graduated magna cum laude in political science, philosophy, and economics from Vanderbilt, was president of the senior class and elected to Phi Beta Kappa. He received his law degree from the University of Virginia and his BCL degree from Oxford University in England, where he was first class honors graduate. Mr. Kennedy is an adjunct professor at LSU Law School and is a substitute teacher for East Baton Rouge Parish Public Schools. He resides in Madisonville, Louisiana, with his wife Becky and their son Preston. They are founding members of the North Cross United Methodist Church.
It is a real pleasure to be back in Shreveport, Bossier. I feel very much at home in Northwest Louisiana. Brings back a lot of fond memories. My oldest brother, who is now a professor of medicine over in Georgia, is a proud graduate, along with, of course, KD. There he is with KD and many of you from Louisiana Tech. I actually attended Louisiana Tech for a while before I decided to move to that SEC football powerhouse called Vanderbilt. I want to thank Sandy for that introduction and you for your warm welcome. Whenever I receive a warm welcome, though, I can't help but thinking about President George Bush at a particularly difficult time in his presidency. He was giving a speech, and he started off this way. He said, "I want to thank all of you for that warm welcome, especially those of you who waved with all 5 fingers." For those of you who don't know me, my name really is John Kennedy. Now, I'm proud of my name, but I confess I do get frustrated. I've heard all of the John Kennedy jokes. Why aren't you dead? Is your wife's name Jackie? Is your middle name Fitzgerald? So though I am proud of my name, I get frustrated. But lately, when I start to feel frustrated, I remind myself it could be a lot worse. My last name could be Wiener. Seriously though, I'm very proud of others in New York for rejecting Congress. Moral principles matter. They matter in government and they matter in life. I want to talk today just for a few minutes about one, maybe 2 subjects if I have time, and then I want to leave plenty of time for questions. We can talk about anything I talk about or anything you want to talk about. If you hang around the state capitol building in Baton Rouge long enough, you're going to hear somebody say, we just don't have enough money. We just don't have enough money. I wish we could raise taxes. And the numbers don't substantiate that. Our current budget is $25.4 billion. It's just a fact. When Kathleen Blanco was governor, when Governor Blanco presided, the budget was $19 billion. When Governor Foster was governor, seems like yesterday to me, the budget was $12 billion. So we've gone from a $12 billion budget to a $19 billion budget to a $25.4 billion budget over a period of time when we haven't added population. In fact, we lost congressional seats. And inflation has been below 2% on an annualized basis. The numbers are the numbers. I don't think our problem is the amount of money we have. I honestly, sincerely, truly believe that the problem is how we spend the money that we do have. We all talk a good game. You know, if you ask the average policymaker in Baton Rouge at the Capitol, you know, what are our priorities? They'll say higher education, teacher pay, infrastructure, economic development, health care. And it's true that we do spend some of our money there. But we spend a lot of our money, strike that, we spend a lot of your money on other things that aren't nearly as important. One of those things has been in the news lately, and I thought I'd talk for a few minutes about it. Perhaps you heard the coverage about NGOs. NGO stands for non-governmental organization. If we were talking about Congress, we would be referring to earmarks. What's this all about? Our state constitution is very clear that you can't use public money, your hard-earned taxpayer dollars, for a private purpose. I can't go get a legislator to introduce and pass an appropriation to give my neighbor $10,000 of taxpayer money because I think he's a good guy. He is a good guy, but that would be illegal. But through the years, some in Baton Rouge have figured out a way around that constitutional prohibition. The Constitution has been interpreted to say that my neighbor can receive that money as long as he signs an agreement with the state promising to use the money for a public purpose, to help the poor, for example. The legislature figured this out in the mid-1970s, and they started appropriating money to private entities who say they'll use the money for a public purpose. Since this process started in 1974, my best guess, they didn't always keep records, but my best guess is that we have spent a minimum of $500 million taxpayer dollars on these NGOs. It's staggering. In 2007, Governor Blanco, why, I'm not sure, but I'm glad she did, transferred the responsibility to me to supervise these NGOs as state treasurer. Now, I can't control whether the legislature appropriates the money, but I tell you what I can control and have tried to control. When an NGO gets an appropriation, I require them to sign a contract. First, I require them to send me a budget. Some of them don't know how to fill out a budget. But we work with them, come up with a budget, and then I make them sign a contract. And that contract says it's backed by two gubernatorial executive orders and the state statute. It says, look, you've got to send me quarterly reports telling me, so I can tell taxpayers how you spent this money and why it was a public purpose and what benchmarks did you use to measure performance. And you can't just send me a report, you got to send me invoices and canceled checks and receipts. And if you don't do that, you got to get the money back. I make them sign it. About 34 of them since 2007 have totally ignored me. They won't respond to my letters for the reports. They won't answer phone calls. They won't answer emails. And I'll read you some of the ones that have refused to respond, and just so you have an indication of where your money goes. The legislature gave $520,000 to the 12th Ward Save Our Community organization. $130,000 to the Community Awareness Revitalization and Enhancement Corporation. $25,000 to the Daughter of Promise. $75,000 to the Just Willing Foundation. $50,000 to the Purple Circle Social Club. That's a bar in Baton Rouge. Serenity 67, $150,000. Succor Incorporated, $550,000. The Cologne Foundation, $300,000. The Olive Branch Ministries, $20,000. I could keep going. I could spend the rest of the afternoon. Now, the legislature is within its rights, unless you tell them to stop it, to spend your taxpayer money this way. But if they're going to do it, at a minimum, they need to be accountable to taxpayers for how they spent the money. They ignored me since from today until 2007. The last legislative session, we passed a bill to create a new Office of Debt Recovery to start collecting the state's debts. I know that's a novel thought. We've got about $1.6 billion in total receivables, and about 60% of them are 180 days past due. But that's a separate story. But now we've got a new Office of Debt Recovery. And what I have announced is that I am going to turn all of these NGOs that have not filed their reports over to the Office of Debt Recovery. We're going to get the money. And if they don't have the money, we're going to see if they have assets. Some of them use money for buildings, use this money for buildings. We're going to go seize the buildings. This is a very concrete example, and I could give many, many others. This is a very concrete example of how we talk a good game in Baton Rouge, of how we talk about spending money on our priorities, but we spend the money elsewhere. And I'll tell you, it's not just in the NGOs, the appropriations. We found that a lot of these NGOs have gotten very clever. They don't go through the appropriation process. They quietly go over to a department and get their money through a consulting contract. We have found 24 different instances where these NGOs got money in the budget. Governor Jindal, to his credit, vetoed it, and they walked right across the street and got the money from one of his cabinet secretaries. So they're very, very, very clever. And if I have seen the legislature spend as much as 50, in some cases $75 million on NGOs. A few years ago, under a prior governor, if you served on the House Appropriations Committee as a member of the legislature, you were given $50,000 of taxpayer money to spend any way you wanted to. And many of them spent it on these non-governmental organizations. Imagine what we could do today. We spent at least $500 million, that B is in billion, since 1974. Imagine what we could do today. And I'm not saying they're all bad. Some of the NGOs, the Council on Aging, for example, does a wonderful job. But many of them don't. And it's inexcusable. It's inexcusable that they refuse to report to you how they spend your hard-earned taxpayer dollars. Imagine what we could do if we had that $500 million, $500 million today. Imagine what we could do at our universities. Imagine what we could do with our infrastructure. We could have finished I-49 long ago. Imagine what we could do with our healthcare delivery system. Imagine what we could do with our teacher pay. So when next time you hear a legislator or anybody in the state talk about we need to spend on priorities, and we're spending the money on the things we need most, so that's why we need more of your money because we don't have enough. You should remind them about NGOs. This is real money, and it comes out of your pocket. Some of my colleagues think this money just falls from heaven. We thank heaven for it, but it doesn't. It comes from Louisiana taxpayers, and you worked hard for it. I'm going to leave time for questions. Let me just end on this note. When I grew up in a little town outside of Baton Rouge called Zach. Okay? It's changed a lot since I grew up there. I mean, they've got a wonderful school system, and they've always rich people from Baton Rouge moved there, and they got golf courses. And when I grew up there, I didn't know anybody who owned golf clubs, much less what a golf course was. But I just loved Zachary. I loved growing up there. I went to Zachary High School, cared about two things: basketball and cheerleaders. And I wasn't any good at either one. Oh, I had fun trying. But every Sunday, we went to church. My mom and dad helped found the church. And the story I loved the most in Sunday school, you remember it, was the story of Jonah and the whale. If you remember, God spoke to Jonah. He said, Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh and preach to them because they're wicked. They're being very wicked. Of course, I always remember, thinking, what are they doing in Nineveh? But Jonah was scared because the people of Nineveh were not only wicked, they were mean. So Jonah was scared. So he called a boat and headed in the opposite direction for Tarshish. Well, God, of course, wasn't a fool. God saw this, and God caused a great storm to come up, threw Jonah overboard. He was swallowed by a whale. He lived in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, praying the whole time. And then, into the third night, the whale spit Jonah out on the beach, and God appeared to Jonah. And you know what God did? He didn't fuss at Jonah. He didn't criticize Jonah. He didn't even try to make Jonah feel guilty. He just said, Jonah, get up and go. Get up and go. And that's what we've got to do in Louisiana, folks. We just got to get up and go. This is a wonderful state. I could sit here stand here the rest of the afternoon listing all of the assets just of Shrevary and Bossier. This is a wonderful state. But we need to get up and go and make it better. Because we talk a lot about the future. Politicians are real good at that. But you know what the future is? The future is a bunch of little things that we do right now, today, strung together. Thank y'all for having me. If that's okay, I'll answer questions. We can talk about anything you want to talk about. Yes, sir.
Hey, John, quick question. About 25, 30 years ago, there was a company called Public Investors Trust that the state ended up taking over. And all of those investors still haven't received those revenues from the state. It's been tied up in litigation, and the attorneys are making a great fortune on it. But it's never been returned. My mother-in-law would sure like to see that. It'd be a nice thing. But these type of investments.
I'll be glad to. I'm not familiar with it, but I'll be glad to look into it. If you want to call me in my office later or on my cell, well, don't call the cell. I'll give you my cell number if y'all need me. It's 225-229-1869. That's the good news. The bad news is my cell phone's on my desk at the office. That's why I got some work done in the hotel room this morning. But feel free to call me and I'll be glad to look into it. What else? Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
What's your opinion about the public-private partnerships at the state hospitals?
Great question. First, I'm glad they didn't sell our hospital in Shrevary. That was the original plan. The original plan, LSU Shreveport, I know the health science has got a long form name. I call it LSU Shreveport and the med school connected. Without question, the best run public hospital in Louisiana, hands down. Got 70% private pay patients. Dr. McDonald built a great institution. It's got deep community support, extraordinarily well run. When we ran out of money, the first plan in Baton Rouge of the Department of Health and Hospitals was to sell it. And there was a lot of support for that. It didn't happen because you opposed it. If they were going to sell the hospital, take the cash, dump it in the budget, today it'd be gone. Here's why we're doing the privatizations. Last summer, the feds cut our Medicaid budget by $900 million. Why? After after the storm, the first storm, the feds gave us extra money for Medicaid. They told us, this is temporary money. We're not going to keep giving it to you, okay? Prepare for the day that it will stop. Of course, we didn't. And then all of a sudden they said, boom, we told you it was going to end. We got problems of our own. It ends. We're $900 million short. So the governor's proposed a plan that we privatize the hospitals because the private sector can run them better than the public. And I agree with that. I agree with that. There's no doubt in my mind that a Willis-Knighton or a Shumpert or a Cabrini or a Children's Hospital in New Orleans or a Lady in Lake can run a hospital at least as well and probably better than the state. Okay? But the devil's in the details. Now, the Biomedical Foundation here in Shreveport has stepped up to the plate, and they're going to take over the hospital here. I thank them for that. It can work. I hope it does work. But I will tell you there are a couple of changes that I think they can make to make the whole arrangement stronger for the people of Northwest Louisiana. Number one, the Biomedical Foundation is not going to run the hospital. We're going to lease it to them, the hospital, and I mean, remember this is I don't know how many billion-dollar asset with a cash flow of about $400 million a year that contributes about $900 million to this economy of Northwest Louisiana. We're going to lease that asset to them for 99 years. Okay? But they're not going to run the hospital. They haven't selected the entity that's going to run the hospital yet. I think we ought to put, I'm sure they'll do a good job and select somebody good. But I would like to see a provision put in there that our legislature has the authority to finally approve the entity picked to run it. I mean, let me put it this way. If you were transferred to Monroe, and you got a nice home here in Shreveport, you like the economy, you think it's going to appreciate value, and you say, well, I'm going to keep my home in Shreveport, just lease it out. And a nice young couple comes to you and says, I'll lease your house, and you're real happy with them, you do a credit report, you like them, they're going to pay the lease money, but they say, here's the thing, I want a 99-year lease, and I want the right to sublease it to anybody I want to. You're going to go, whoa. You know, what if you sublease it to Dennis Rodman or something? You know? So I think it's a pretty reasonable request that I'm making. The second thing that I would ask them to respectfully do, these are your assets. This is your money. There should be some transparency. I think all the records ought to be subject to the public records document. And I think we ought to have the right, you should have the right, to send in the legislative auditor and the legislative fiscal office to look at the numbers to make sure that everything's working. I'm not saying it won't be on the up and up and won't work well. I've got a lot of confidence in the biomed folks. But this is business. I believe in what Ronald Reagan used to say. So when I trust everybody. When I play poker, though, I cut the cards. Okay? Same principle here. So I think if we did those two things, we'd have a much, much stronger arrangement for the people of Northwest Louisiana. Because make no mistake about it, if something happens to that hospital, and more importantly, if something happens to that medical center, all the economic development projects in the world, we can spend millions of dollars luring companies coming to this place. I know that's a long answer, but I feel pretty strongly about it. They're coming in front of us next month at the Bond Commission, and I'm going to have a few questions for them. What else? There's one more. This gentleman was first, and I'll give both of you, and I'll try to shut up and get shorter answers.
What do you think about repealing the state income tax?
I like it. I'm all for it. I wasn't for the governor's proposal because he was going to repeal the income tax but raise tax on businesses by taxing the services by $500 million. That never made sense to me. What does make sense to me is examining between all we have these special laws that say they're exemptions to our sales, income, and excise taxes that say certain people and certain entities don't have to pay those taxes that you and I have to pay. Between that and our statutory dedications, we've got about $7 billion tied up. We ought to have the political courage to go look at every one of those, keep the ones that are working, get rid of the ones that aren't, then we'd have enough money to get rid of the income tax. Yes?
Finally, helping wrote an article
Uh-oh.
in the Times. It said the state has cut $690 million from higher education since 2008, and that's 48% of the amount that they were paying in 2008. Are those figures accurate? And if so, how is this? Is there any objective evidence of how this is affecting the cost of education to the student?
Well, is a really good reporter. I mean, his son, Gregory Monroe, is as well. I agree with half his numbers. The legislature, we used to spend about $1.6 billion out of our general fund for our universities. Today, we're spending about $600 million. They cut about $1 billion over the last 5 years. It's about 72%. They've made up the difference with tuition. Not totally. And some of my friends in higher ed disagree with me, but I think that's a huge mistake. About 21% of Louisianians have a college degree, 29% of Americans do. We tell our kids you've got to go get a degree, whether it's a 4-year or VOTEC or a community college, and how we help them, we're raising the price. Okay? Since 1985, we had a necessity in American life go up 500%. I'm not talking about gasoline. It's gone up, but not that much. I'm not talking about health care. I'm not talking about the price of a home. Since 1985, tuition in America has gone up 500%. And these kids can't afford it. And it is embarrassment to me when we're spending as much money as we do on political consulting contracts. And it's embarrassing to me when we're spending this kind of money on these NGOs that we have to balance the budget for our universities on the backs of our kids. And it is wrong. And it needs to stop. Those universities are hugely important. I made a list. I hope I don't step on toes here, but it's the truth. I made a list of all the assets we have in northwest Louisiana, just from memory, just driving up. I'm not going to read them, but it's like 3/4 of the page. But there's one thing missing here. We've got some extraordinary universities in Shreveport, Bossier, but we don't have a major research university. And the money is there to do it. What else? One more? Let me get one over. No, you go ahead, sir. I promise. I'm sorry. I'll get you next. I'm sorry.
Last year, the legislature changed the retirement program for state employees
Yes.
from a defined benefit to a hybrid defined contribution plan.
Yes.
With the idea of slowing the increase in the unfunded retirement pension fund.
Yes.
Do you have any idea how that's working?
I supported the bill. I think it would have worked. Unfortunately, the governor was short of his votes, and the Speaker of the House ruled that it only took a majority vote. A suit was filed, and the Louisiana Supreme Court recently ruled it took a 2/3 vote, so they threw the whole thing out. I don't know if the governor's going to try again. Hope he does. We're about $18 billion short in our retirement systems based on a 7% discount rate. If you use the true discount rate of about 3 or 4%, we're about $30 billion short. And so we need to do something. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Thank you, that's all right. I intend this to be a friendly question. I hope it comes across that way.
Okay.
We're the only state in the country to have rejected a federal grant to provide a statewide broadband network. In our case, we lost about $80 million. Can you help us understand how that happened?
I don't know. I'm surprised when the governor did it. I'm not saying he did the wrong thing, because frankly, I'm not an expert on the issue. I'm just telling you I was very surprised when he did do it. Technology has changed our lives. It certainly changed the lives of the life of my 17-year-old. In a net positive way. I mean, we see what's happening just in Africa. Just the mobile phone alone is changing the whole continent. I don't know why he did it. I hope that when he comes back, you'd invite him to speak, and you could ask him that. I don't know. One last one? Yes, sir?
Of the 34 NGOs that you mentioned, are any of them located in Northwest Louisiana?
Yes, and I was thinking this morning, I'm gonna get, there are some, and I don't have them marked on here which ones, but I will get you those. There are a lot out of Shrevary, and I would strongly encourage you and some of our legislators are against these things. Many of our legislators are. Barry Peacock, for example, Jeff Thompson, I think they're going to help me get rid of them. But what I want to do is require the legislature we wouldn't have to amend the Constitution, to vote on these things. They bury them in the budget. I want to require the legislature to vote on these things one by one in front of God, country, and the public, and require 2/3 vote. And I will bet you that the Purple Circle Social Club doesn't even try. They're going to be too embarrassed. And they're not going to be able to find a legislator to sponsor it in the light of day. Thanks again for having me. God bless you.